Hey YouTube, it's your girl Dr. J, and I am back comparing U.S. Common Core standards to the standards that are used in other countries that are kicking our butt in math. So today's country is going to be Japan. Now, I'm not going to provide a link in the description box to Japanese standards, mainly because they're written in Japanese. But what I'm going to be using is some English-based information, and one of those big things comes from a study done by Keith Jones at the University of Southampton in the UK. I'm using this because it's really a unbiased or pretty much impartial jury or person's opinion when he didn't have anything to gain. He's not working for one of those governments, so there's no reason to kind of pump one up versus the other. So that's I'm going to be using that for a lot of the facts that I give, and I'm going to be bringing in some other things as well. Another thing that I want to make sure that I point out early in this is that as you start to research U.S. Common Core, you will probably hear the statement that U.S. Common Core math standards are based on the math standards in Singapore and Japan. This is not an entirely truthful statement, and I'm going to tell you why. The reason is because while they did adopt some of the sequencing of when different areas of math were taught, they did not also bring over the teaching method. That would be like somebody saying that they're going to use my recipe for making pound cake. And even though they use all the ingredients, they don't follow the rest of the recipe. So they don't cream the butter and sugar together. Okay, well, guess what? If you don't cream the butter and sugar together, then it's not going to turn out. It's not going to be my pound cake. If you don't cook it on the same level of heat that I cook, it's not going to be my cake. If you don't bake it in the same pan, if you don't use the same cooking methods, then it's not going to be my cake. So don't tell the world you're baking my cake when you are not following the methods that are used to produce my end result. So the ingredients is not enough. You also need the methods. And that is the difference between what's happening in the U.S. Common Core standards and what these other countries are doing. So let's get to Japanese versus U.S. When it comes to teaching mathematics. Okay, so in the United States, it says the average student spends 143 hours per year studying math. And this is going to be like at the high school level. Whereas in Japan, the figure is 117 hours per year. So in the U.S. per year, the average ninth grader is going to spend 143 hours studying math. In Japan, 117. Now, here is a very, very interesting comparison. In the U.S., textbooks are used during class almost half the time. So 50% of the time when a student is in math class in the United States, textbooks are going to be used 50% of the time. In Japan, textbooks are used in the classroom 2% of the time. 2%. That's it. Generally in Japan, textbooks are used for homework. Okay? But we're going to get to homework in a minute. Okay. So, it talks about in learning a skill such as being able to solve a certain problem or using a standard formula. That was a goal that was listed for 60% of U.S. mathematics teachers, using a specific formula or following a specific standard. Whereas in Japan, only 27% of teachers said that was something that they do. Now, look at it a different way. It says mathematical thinking, such as exploring, developing, and understanding concepts or discovering multiple solutions to the same problem, was described as the goal of the lesson 71% of the time for Japanese mathematics teachers. So 71% of the time that they are having students go over a mathematics lesson, the goal is for that student to be able to solve that problem in more than one way. Whereas 21% of U.S. teachers said that was ever a goal for them. Okay, so in the U.S., 90% of working time in mathematics lessons was spent on routine procedures in comparison to 41% of the time in Japan. So most of the time in Japan, students are working on math in non-routine ways, whereas in the United States, 71% of the time. Okay, students were asked to invent new solutions, proofs, or procedures on their own, which required them to think and reason. 44% in Japan. So 44% of the time, the students were going to be asked to come up with their own formulas, create their own ways, solve the problem in their own way, do it, figure it out for themselves, and do it in the way that seemed right to them to get to the end result. That happened 1% of the time in the United States. So most of the time in the United States, a student is going to be asked to solve a problem in a particular way. Do it this way or it is wrong. I have a lot of parents who come to me and say, my child got the answer right, but the teacher said, because you did not do it the right way, you don't get credit. Whereas in Japan, a country that is kicking our butt in math, they say, hey, invent a new way. If you have a way, if you create a way that's going to get you the right answer, most of the time, the vast majority of the time, you've invented a new solution. That's great. So that's encouraged. Whereas in the United States is you do it one way. Okay, so explicit links between concepts used in one part of a lesson or idea and put into another part of the lesson was a feature of 96% of Japanese mathematics compared to 40% of U.S. mathematics. So most of the time, Japan is all about linking mathematical concepts. That's like when you're teaching your child how to tell time, linking it to fractions. Okay, so, you already know fractions. You already know what that 1/4 is a quarter. So when you're talking about a quarter hour, that's the fraction, 1/4. Okay. That's going to be done 96% of the time in Japan. Okay. Now, remember that I told you I was coming back to homework because in Japan, homework, the textbooks are used in the classroom about 2% of the time, and they're mainly used for homework. Let's talk about homework. In the United States, 86% of U.S. mathematics teachers sent at least 90 minutes of homework per week, compared to 21% of Japanese teachers, where typically homework is set at less than 1 hour per week. Okay, guys, see that? So in the U.S., at least 90 minutes of homework is sent down per week, whereas in Japan, it's less than 1 hour. You see, they're not going to be textbook heavy. It's all about doing. And you guys remember when I talked about STEM and how mathematics is a part of STEM, and STEM is all about doing. Your child has to do, perform, create, discover on their own in order for it to be effective. That's how it is in Japan. So, but in Japan, even though they don't have to do additional homework, a lot of times they said that students choose, or their parents chose, to have about they do about 30 minutes per night of studying math on their own. This is going to be in the higher grades, and this is going to be as they prepare for higher stakes testing. Students in Japan don't encounter high stakes testing until they are in the 9th, 10th, 11th grade, until they're about to finish school. Why? Why are they preparing for that? Because so many kids are so good in math that it's just percentage points that determines, if you get into this university versus that university. So not all kids, so you don't have, kids that are 4 years old in Japan doing 30, 40 minutes a night of math work. Okay. That comes when they are older. That comes right before they're trying to get ready for university. And that's going to be their first experience with high stakes testing. And because math is taught so well there, you have a lot of competition. Okay, so they're competing against their peers. They're not competing against some arbitrary standard. They're not competing to try to pass. They're competing to try to go to the next level. And because everyone is so well prepared, just using that textbook 2% of the time, that's why they're doing that extra practice. But it's coming later. Okay. Then in Japan, it says the typical Year 9 mathematics lessons in Japan has the following format. The teacher poses a complex, thought-provoking problem. Students struggle with the problem. Various students present ideas or solutions to the class. The class discusses the various solution methods. The teacher summarizes the class's conclusions, and then students practice similar problems. Okay, that's the teacher presents the problem. Students get together, they grapple with it, they think about it. Everybody start to give their ideas. People go back and forth in discussion, and then the teacher says, okay, this is what we discovered today. Flip that with, this is what happens in the typical U.S. classroom. Teacher instructs students in a concept or skill. Teacher solves example problems with the whole class. Students practice on their own while teachers assist individual students. I know this happened in my schooling. I know this happened, it's still happening in the classrooms today. So it's teacher focused as opposed to student discovery. If a teacher gets on the board and says, this is how you solve this problem, all the kids are going to solve the problem that way, as opposed to just presenting the problem out there and letting kids learn and discover and make their way through it on their own. Where as they do it on their own, they're going to find different paths. They may find paths different than what the teacher would have put forth. They may find paths that are unique. They may discover something new. They get an opportunity to do that. They are going to have discussion about it. That is completely different than our teacher-based, lecture-based classroom experience that we have here in the U.S. Another thing that is okay, so for a typical U.S., class is set by ability, relies on a textbook, focuses on developing mathematical skill, devotes most available time to practicing routine procedures, features isolated tasks. Whereas in Japan, mixed ability classroom, begins with the complex problem, focuses on developing mathematical thinking, devotes most time to mathematical reasoning and understanding, makes explicit links between concepts. So, fractions are not separate from decimals. Algebra is not separate from geometry. Okay, they don't have those silos in math that we have here in the U.S. So that's going to be another thing. Some other notes that I wrote in schools in Japan. Okay, teachers rotate grades and they rotate schools. So a teacher that teaches first year math this year may teach second year math at a different school. The next year may teach 6th year math at a different school later. So they know the sequencing that's needed. They're going to get practice. They're going to see what it means when a child doesn't get this concept before that concept. They have a much bigger, much wider picture, and they don't get stuck in a routine of, this is how I did it last year, so I already got my lesson ready for this year. They're constantly changing. They do a lot of peer-to-peer mentoring. They do a lot of classroom observation. The teachers work together a lot more. So that's how mathematics is done. There's a lot of focus on logic, using logic to solve problems, and logic is integrated in the math. We don't see that here in the United States, and we don't see it at all in Common Core. And the way that math is taught, a lot of things are integrated into the math. Math is not an isolated subject. For instance, it's common in math in Japan to incorporate music and art as part of the mathematics lessons. Okay, that's not in Common Core. Music is not mentioned in Common Core. Math is not mentioned in Common Core. Art is not mentioned in math for Common Core. So, these are things. This is how mathematics is taught. This is the difference. So you guys see, just because you use the sequencing, if you don't also bring over the methods, you're not using the same thing. Another thing that I wanted to show you guys is this book. This book is called Math Girls, okay, and it is written by Hiroshi Yuki, okay, and it was translated by Tony Gonzalez. And the reason why I bring this up is that this is a math book that was written by a Japanese author. Okay, and it's a really top seller in Japan, and students use it. This is what they read for fun. Okay, math girls, and this is a book that's just, it has lots of mathematical formulas in it, and it has lots of math discussion and ideas, and it's about a boy who's having these, there's a mathematical genius girl he's talking with and a struggling girl that he has these different conversations with. So when they grapple with the math problem, he figures it out with the math genius, and he explains it to the girl that's struggling. So you get this depth of understanding with mathematics concepts. This is what kids are reading for fun. Okay. And a lot of people are surprised here in the U.S. when their child is just really gung ho over books like Life of Fred, which has a story based math to it, and it's like they go, oh my gosh, I can't believe my kid wants to read a math book. Well, guess what? Kids that kick our butt in math, that's what they're using. This is fun. This is intriguing. This is exciting, and it is a good story. I definitely suggest you pick it up. I got it on Amazon, especially if you have a math loving child. But that really shows the contrast between math here in the United States, especially with our new Common Core, and math compared to people that are kicking our butt. Okay, when they do math, it's just a completely different phenomenon. They come at it from a completely different way. Math it's not an isolated subject. It's not a boring subject. It's not something that pick up this book, turn to this page, follow this sequence. In Common Core, textbook publishers are grappling to oh, hey, we're linked to Common Core. We're linked to Common Core. If we were following Japanese standards, every textbook publishing company in this country would be in an uproar because their products will be used less. Because it's not about using the book, open up a book and saying, okay, turn to page 4, follow this formula. It's about developing mathematical thinking and reasoning. That is not a part of Common Core. And the proof is in the pudding of publishing companies being so happy to be linked to Common Core. That's not how they're doing it in Japan. That's not how they're teaching it in Singapore. So that's our next country that we explored. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, feel free to post below. This is Dr. J, and I'm out.